Good morning. So I apparently made too long of a recording last night and YouTube didn't take it. So excuse that I'm in my pajamas and I have my coffee with me. So I wanted to show you quickly some of the things that I do to speed up my editing process in Audition. Right now I have an audiobook up here that I am currently editing. And over in the right hand side here, you see the markers. Now, I like to have the markers on the right hand side. So the first thing I do is I switch to radio production up here. Default still puts your markers over here. Point is, what you want to do is get your workspace into a flow that works for you. I like to have my effects, my files, and my markers. Okay. Now, markers are really important. I'll show you why. As I'm recording, if I make a mistake, I hit the M key every time. Okay, if I trip over a sentence or I pause too long, I hit the M key. As I'm recording the whole time, my finger is on M. Every time I make a mistake, I just click M and continue working. Now you see, every time I do that, it creates a marker over here. That way, at the end of the recording, I have all of my edits laid out for me over here. All I have to do is click on that marker. It'll take me right there. All right, now if I started a sentence over again, let me show you what that looks like. So marker 4. If I started a sentence over again, here would be the wrong part because it's before the marker. Here would be the correct part because it's after the marker. Now sometimes it takes a little bit of playing back to find out exactly where it was, okay? And that's just the space bar. You click space bar, space bar. Get familiar with the keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to show you how to add one in just a second because it's very useful. So keyboard shortcuts include stuff like spacebar play, spacebar stop playing. To go left and right, zoom is the minus and the plus key up on my keyboard. To zoom up and down, to zoom on the vertical axis, which I don't always do, but I do to find breath marks, is option, plus or minus. Or you can also use the scroll on your mouse to zoom in and zoom out along the x-axis here, which is good. That way, if you need to be a little bit more precise in your selection, you can do that. And if you hold shift down and then use your scroll wheel, it moves you left and right in the process. So that's the shift and the scroll. There's a breath right there. So now, one of the ways I would have zoomed in on that in real life. So if I'm listening, I can see that right there. I want to select that, which means I want to get close to it, okay? So I would zoom in on it, move it over. I'm doing all this by holding the shift key and using my scroll wheel, selecting that. Now here's the keyboard shortcut that we're going to add, because Audition, for whatever reason, doesn't have a keyboard shortcut for silence, and silence is so important. So you could go up to effects every time and click silence, but you see I assigned the X there, and that's under edit, keyboard shortcuts. Anything that you do all the time, and I silence things all the time because I take out breath marks, I assign a key for. So right here, I would just type in silence. You could go to effects. Let me do that again. Maybe I spelled it wrong. Edit, keyboard shortcuts. Okay. Silence, I did. It's under effects right here. You click on it. Let's get rid of this and I'll show you how easy it is to add one. So you click on it and you click add and then click the X key. I didn't have to hold it down or anything. I just clicked add and then hit the X key. Now I can do this also if I want to do a couple of things here, but for right now, that's a great thing to do, silence, all right? Okay. That way, when I select a breath, I hit the X key and the breath is gone. Now, when do I suggest doing the breath? If you do the breath immediately, like right now, you're going to spend a lot of time that you don't really need to do, because you want to set up an effects rack over here that's going to do some of this work for you. Some of the work, I mean, it's going to cancel out any other sound that's in here. It'll leave the breath because the breath is big enough. But instead of having to select that whole thing every time and then Xing it and canceling it out, here's what you want to do. You want to throw an adaptive noise reduction in your effects rack, okay? You're going to set that to about light noise reduction. That's here. this little button, edit effect. But when you add the effect, adaptive noise reduction, which is noise reduction restoration right here. When you add it, it's going to let you select it. You select light noise reduction. Multi-band compressor. I'm going to show you the settings that I use for all of my things. I'm not going to talk about it to keep the video short, but you can see what I use. All right. Multi-band compressor. I don't like to use too much compression on it because I want it to sound normal. Plus, I'm right in front of my microphone. I'm talking correctly into my microphone when I'm doing this. I have a very high signal to noise ratio. Here's my settings. The only place that I do a lot of compression in is about this range right here. All right. This range right here, I compress. Everything else is about the same. Now you can use a preset here. I would stay away from broadcast just because broadcast really crunches everything together. So let's get rid of that. When I say I have a good signal to noise ratio, take a look at my recording. My recording generally peaks between -12 and -9. That's good. That's good. That makes me happy. Okay, those are my highest peaks, between -12 and -9. Now, there are a couple of places I probably hit a P or a B where I peak a little bit above -9, but still, between -12, -9 is where I'm looking for. Okay, if I don't want to get too close to hitting 0 when I talk, so I'm looking for my levels to hit about here on my bar. See if I circle it big enough. Anyway, I'm looking for it to get about here. Then everything else I do here. So I compress it, do a little bit of dynamics processing. This is for my voice. This is the way I like to keep it for my voice. Okay? That's it. But you see the things that I'm doing to it. I'm compressing and expanding, depending on the parts of my voice. Certain parts of my voice pop more than other parts. Certain parts of my voice are dull, and that's when I would use those things there. Parametric equalizer. This changes the overall tone of my voice. I remove a little bit of the mids. I'm sending it through my mixer absolutely clean. I do any effect like this in Audition. So I'm going to show you the curve that I use for my voice. I put a little bit back up in the high end to bring a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of clarity out. That's my preference. That's what I like to listen to. That's what I like the sound like. And I add a little boost in the bottom because I generally don't have too much of a resonant tone, my actual voice. So I'll throw that there. And then 3, you see 3 here is a little bit of a dip. That's where I had a little bit of room noise, a little bit of where my room was reverberating. So I took a little bit of that out so that I would have less of the color of the room in my sound. Lastly, a hard limiter. I set this to -0.1, okay? -0.1. My input boost, this is just for me. As I'm watching my input and output here, I want my output to hit just above that -6, to be in the -3 to -1 range. I want it to hover, to stay around -3 decibels. But I want the peaks to be at 0.1, at -0.1, because anything above that is going to distort. But I also don't want everything to be at -1, because everything is going to sound really boring and just compressed and crunched into that space. So I'm looking for everything to fit right here. You see where my mouse is? On the output. So I added a little bit of an input boost, and then my maximum amplitude right here. My release time and my look ahead time should be fairly short, both of them. The release time at about 100 milliseconds, because if you make that too long or too short, it starts to sound funky. So here is my effects rack. Last thing you're going to do here is you're going to save your effect rack as a preset so that every time you can come right to it. Scott. Okay, that's my effects rack. Now I'm going to show you quickly. You can do selection only, or you can process the entire file. Once you have your effects on here, you can hear how it sounds. You can turn off the effects, hear it dry, hear how it sounds, then click apply. Okay, it's applying this. after it did the adaptive noise reduction and after it amplified things, that's when I come in and I look for the breath. These are the breath. That's a breath right here. This is a breath right here. That's when I go in and get rid of it because it removed most of all the other noise that's right here. Now here's something right here. I might have hit a key on my keyboard or something like that. Anyway, I have an X key set up to just silence these out. Okay, I'm zoomed in here for my breath. I hold the shift key and I scroll left and right. I get to the next breath, select it, exit out. Let's watch it one more time. Going left and right. This is a very small breath, but it's there. Depending on how you want it, sometimes I leave the very small breaths in just so that you can hear that I'm a human being and I talk. But the large ones, I definitely get rid of. Part of the way that I've started talking when I do an audiobook, and you can see it right here, is I'll take a deep breath, pause, and then talk. Okay, I'll make sure that my breath is almost overwhelming, but that way I can see it. I can see it when I'm looking at it, and it doesn't go in with my words because I'll take a deep breath, right here, look. Deep breath, quick pause, talk. To give you an example of a sentence, if I would go, Adobe Audition, Creative Cloud 2015. Adobe Audition, File, Edit, Multitrack, Clip, Effects, Favorites, View, Window, Help. So that's how I breathe in my audiobooks. It took a little bit of practice, but I'm a musician and a singer, so I'm generally a pretty good breather, if that makes sense. Any questions you have, let me know. Hopefully I kept this to under 15 minutes so YouTube doesn't knock it off. It's 11 minutes. Perfect. So those are some of the things that I do. Since I have a couple extra minutes, I'm going to quickly recap. You want to create keyboard shortcuts for when you can. You want to learn the other keyboard shortcuts. You want to record as cleanly as possible, meaning that you're not having to do a lot of post-editing. Your post-editing is mostly in your effects and your editing out things that you didn't want to say. You want to get all of those marked as you're recording. If you find that difficult, then listen to it back one time and just hit the M key every time. I wouldn't do the recording as you're listening. I would listen to the whole thing on a whole. Anytime you hit something you don't like, as soon as it's done, hit the M key, go back, find it, look at it, and just find what you didn't like and delete it. That's just the delete key. Then it flows just like it would normally. Okay, I'm going to undo that because that's something I need. But otherwise, those are all of my tips. Hopefully you find this useful, and I'm sorry that it didn't get up last night. Sorry that I had to do it again this morning. Have a great morning.